Thanks for stopping by today. We're going to talk about why won't my laser cut through the material that I'm used to cutting through. I think we all have seen it before where you kind of get your settings dialed in, you put in a new piece of material that looks the same, is the same thickness, and it doesn't cut all the way through. I think we're seeing more and more of this today than we ever have, and we're going to talk a little bit about why that is. And not to get so hung up on that I've fixed my speed, I've fixed my power, and why isn't it working? We got to remember that this wood is organic stuff. There's a lot of things that we don't have control over. Number one, the wood itself is organic, so it's got different densities. And the other big thing that we can't see is how it's put together, what kind of glue they use, and that is dynamically changing between one batch and another. Right now, manufacturers are struggling to get the materials that they need to put this stuff together to put it on the shelves for us. And what you're going to find is that a lot of times the glue that they use, the process that they use is different than it used to be, and that's why you're not as successful as you might have been 6 months ago or a year ago. So probably the first thing that I will tell you is, especially if you're new and you're not used to kind of dealing with this stuff, please don't get hung up on, okay, I've decided this is my speed, this is my power for 1/4 inch plywood, and I put a new sheet of 1/4 inch plywood in my laser, I put that into light burn and it doesn't work. That's kind of the way it is right now, meaning that you're going to run into that, and so you need to understand, how do I deal with that? In other words, don't let it spin you out. You're just going to have to kind of go forward and push through and find out what new settings you're going to need to deal with that material and the way it was put together. I've got an example today that I'm going to show you that kind of blew my mind. I've got a piece of 1/4 inch MDF here, just normal run-of-the-mill MDF, use it all the time. And I borrowed a small piece of maple veneered MDF that I was going to do a memorial on. The person that I bought it, or that I borrowed it from, said, hey, I can't cut through this material with my 130 watt laser. And I thought to myself, that was kind of odd. You've got one of the biggest lasers that you can purchase and you can't cut through 1/4 inch material? That just doesn't seem possible to me. So I brought it home, did some testing, and sure enough, with my 100 watt machine, I couldn't make any more headway than they did. I could not cut through this 1/4 inch maple veneered MDF. And so what I did is I peeled the veneer back on this MDF, and I'll go ahead and show you what you're going to see here later in the video. But you'll be quite surprised on what's on the inside of this. It looks like your normal run-of-the-mill 1/4 inch veneered MDF, but in fact, I think they've used a completely different type of glue and a manufacturing process, and that's why we're not able to cut through it. Now, thank God I didn't buy a bunch of this or a pallet of this or many sheets, because number one, this stuff is expensive, but number two, I can't use it. So what I would say as we go along in this video today is you're going to have to go with the flow. That's just the way materials are right now, especially when you're talking wood products. Just because it worked for you yesterday and you went down and you got some new material that's the same thickness and you put it in your laser and it doesn't work today, that's kind of what we're all faced with right now. And so it's better if if you're prepared on how to deal with that to move forward. I can tell you that in the last 4 or 5 months now, if I get some new material in and I'm ready to do a project, before I do anything, I'll cut out a small square just to verify that my settings will work. And sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. And I have to tweak those settings in order to get that material to work in my laser. So, you know, quit thinking about that, hey, it worked last time, what's wrong? It's probably that there's not anything wrong with your settings. It's that the wood that you're using was manufactured with a different type of glue. There's just so many variables that it's just not worth worrying about. What you need to do is recognize that it's not cutting through before you lift it off your bed. I'll go ahead and show you how to deal with that today. I've got a video that if for some reason you've got a pattern that you're cutting out and it didn't cut out all the way, how to deal with that. You don't have to ruin that whole piece. I'll show you how to use the Start From feature in the preview window in Lightburn that will save you a ton of time. I'll go ahead and link a video in the description and up top so you can check that out, because that is becoming just more and more a fact of life for us if we're using wood products. So let's go ahead. I'm going to show you kind of the different settings between MDF, just regular Baltic birch, and then this bionic stuff that I've got, and just to prove a point. But that's what we want to do, is we want to learn how to be dynamic, and just don't let it upset you. Just because it didn't cut out doesn't mean that you're doing anything wrong. It's the material that you're using and maybe the glue that the manufacturer is using to put that stuff together. We've just got to learn to roll with it. That's kind of the way we're going to have to deal with things today because of supply chain issues, those kind of things. Let's go check it out. Okay, what I thought I'd do to prove a point here is this is normal, just regular 1/4 inch Baltic birch, nice clean edges, top quality stuff. I don't buy this at a big box store. This comes from a hardwood supplier. I've used this a lot, and this is just your typical good quality Baltic birch from Russia. This here is just 1/4 inch MDF, just some normal stuff. You can see that it's fairly light in color. You can also see how you really can't see any kind of a grain pattern in any way. Your typical MDF. And then this is the maple veneered. So you got two-sided maple veneered MDF. And so from a settings perspective, at least initially, usually your plain Baltic birch is going to be the fastest cut. Your MDF is going to just take just a little bit more power because it's a little denser. And then, you know, normally for this MDF with the maple veneer, again, it'll take just a little bit more power just because you've got another couple of glue lines for the veneer, but really shouldn't take too much more power than what you need for your MDF. So what I've done is I've set it up in Lightburn, and we'll go to Lightburn and I'll show you how I've set this up. I'm gonna cut an inch square in this Baltic birch. I'm gonna cut a 1-inch square in this MDF, and I'm gonna cut 3 1-inch squares in this maple veneered MDF. And I'll show you the settings and the setup that I've got in Lightburn, and so you can see kind of how I set this up. And really all this is doing is demonstrating that these are all 1/4 inch materials. They're all very close to being the same thickness. The focus is going to be set the same, but you will notice that the power required to get the job done, and in some cases can't even get the job done, are quite a bit different. So let's go ahead to go to Lightburn, and I'll show you how I've got this set up. Let's show you what my setup is for these 3 test pieces. So we're going to have a piece of just normal Baltic birch here. In the middle is going to be just 1/4 inch piece of MDF. And then on the right hand side, we're going to have a piece of 1/4 inch two-sided maple veneered with an MDF core. And so our settings are going to be on the 1/4 inch Baltic birch, which is my normal setting that I use all the time. It's going to be 20 millimeters per second at 80% power. I'm going to have the air on, and this is on a Nova 35 100 watt laser. For the MDF, 1/4 inch MDF, I'm going to go with 18 millimeters per second at 80% power. Takes just a little bit more power to get through it because it's a little denser. And then I'm going to do 3 different cuts on this maple veneered MDF core. The first one is going to be at 16 millimeters per second at 80% power, just because we've got 2 veneers and some additional layers of glue. Typically it doesn't take too much more to go through normal maple veneered MDF. And I'm going to cut it at 16 is going to be the top one, 10 is going to be the middle one, and then I'm going to drop it all the way down to 4 millimeters, and I'm going to bump up my speed, or excuse me, my power at 90%. Typically I don't usually go that high, but I want to see if I can punch through this bionic material. So these are going to be the 3 different ones. I think when you see where we actually go to test these, this one is going to cut out beautifully, the MDF is going to cut out real nice, and then you'll see the result when we get to this maple veneered MDF core material. So let's go ahead and go over to the laser. I'll go ahead, we'll cut these in real time so you can see how that looks and what the results are. Now that I've got the setup done in Lightburn, we're just going to take these and I'm going to operate the controller, and we'll just cut these out one at a time. So the first one I'm going to do is the one on the left, the 1/4 inch Baltic birch. We are going to go to Baltic birch, enter. This is going to be at 20 millimeters per second and at 80% power. And you can see that it dropped out, it cut through no problem. Next, we're going to go ahead and move this over to the MDF now. We're going to set a new origin, and we're going to pull up the file for MDF, enter. And this is going to be at 18 millimeters per second at 80% power, a little slower because it's a little denser. And I believe that cut out, we'll see here in just a minute. And then last but certainly not least, we're going to come over here to the maple veneered MDF. I'm going to set a new origin. I'm going to go file, maple veneered MDF, and we're going to start at 16 millimeters per second at 80% power and go all the way down to 4 millimeters per second at 80% power. The other thing that I will tell you is that I have external air, and we're running about 35 psi to the nozzle, and so let's check it out. So that is at 16 millimeters per second. This is going to be at 10 millimeters per second, quite a bit slower. And this is going to be at 4 millimeters per second at 90% power. So this one's quite a bit slower and about as much power as you can throw at it. And when it's done, let's see what we've got. You can see this is incredibly slow for 1/4 inch material. All right. They're all done. We'll move the head out of the way. I'm going to let the air stop so it's not so loud for everybody. The other thing that you can see is there's quite a bit of more soot on the top. So let's take a look at these. So this is a 1/4 inch Baltic birch, just your normal stuff, drops right out, got a beautiful cut, no problem there. The MDF drops out, no problem there. Let's go to the the maple veneered MDF now, and you can see that nothing there, and I just barely cut through at 4 millimeters per second and 90% power, and it's pretty charred. It's just roasted. I wouldn't use that. So this was at 16 millimeters per second at 80%, which is slower than these two. This is at 10 millimeters per second, which is half the speed of what the Baltic birch was. And it took me 4 millimeters at 90% power to get through this 1/4 inch material that's MDF. So you can see that just because it looks roughly the same, it took a lot more power to get through this stuff. And even so, even though I got through it, it is so charred that it's not usable as far as I'm concerned. So this material, even though it's beautiful, it's 1/4 inch, it's not usable for laser. And so what I'll do is I'll show you, if you turn this over, look at the difference here. So this is normal MDF. This is normal MDF on the left here, and this is the Bionic stuff on the right. And you can see that the wood chips are much bigger. You can see how much darker it is than the normal MDF, so they've used a different kind of glue for this than they have for this. And even though you would think, looking at the sides, you can tell that there's quite a bit of difference in color between the regular MDF and this other MDF. Just something you might be looking for when you're shopping for wood. If it's got a dark color, more than likely they've used a different glue and it's not going to work real well in your laser. So just because it walks like a duck and looks like a duck and quacks like a duck doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a duck. So just keep that in mind. So anyway, I wanted to show you this just because, like I said, things are changing when it comes to materials, and you've got to be ready to deal with it. And so even though you think you've got your settings dialed in, you're probably going to have to modify them at times, no matter what materials you're using, especially when it comes to wood. So I hope this information was helpful. I just wanted to kick that out there so you guys aren't thinking that you're going crazy. Just don't let it bother you, and just adjust your settings accordingly. Again, if you're shopping for wood, anything dark, whether it's the MDF that's darker, or even if you're shopping for Baltic birch, if you see the dark lines in these layers of wood, stay away from that stuff, because chances are you're not going to be able to cut it out. In this next section, I'm going to show you what a glue pocket looks like when you're cutting things out, and how to deal with glue pockets. And let's go check that out now. Okay, let's see if we can find a glue pocket on this side. I'd like to do this real time just so you can see what actually happens. There we go. There's a glue pocket in that upper right-hand corner. So we'll let the rest of these finish, but I can tell you we found a glue pocket. You can see that dark mark, and it's affecting two different pieces. So we'll finish this cut, and then I'll show you how to deal with when you find a glue pocket like this. I'm just glad we found one. Glue pockets are kind of a fact of life when you're dealing with plywood. Good quality Baltic birch has fewer glue pockets. Big box stores and their plywood, you know, it's designed for construction, not laser cutting, and so you'll find a lot more glue related issues with big box store plywood than you will if you're buying it from a quality cabinet place, or, you know, places where they're getting this Baltic birch from Russia. That's typically the best you can get. Looks like we did find a glue pocket, but maybe only one. So we'll let this finish, and then we'll take a quick look at this. Okay, it looks like to me, you can see right here. So all the rest of these are cut out. This is not cut out, and this is not cut out because there's a little glue pocket right here. And you can see that it straddles two pieces. Now, you can see that all the rest of these are loose, right? But these two are not loose. If you come back up to, and I may have moved this piece a little bit, if you come back up to let's see, it looks like it's the third one down. If you come back to the preview window and open the preview window and back this up, take your slider and back this up until you get to start to cut the third one. What we're going to do is we're going to start right about there, and we're going to say start from here, and we're going to say start job from laser here. And you're going to see now, yeah, I moved it. But you can see that I could just cut that one section out, and away we go. And the air's not going. So I'll put a video to the link of this and you'll see, but that's the quickest way. And then all I would do is hit pause and escape. And if we would have had that lined up, it would have recut that line and these would have dropped out. But that's what a glue pocket looks like, is when you get these dark sooty marks on the top of your work. You notice that all the rest of these don't have any soot on the top at all. And then you've got this one right here. That's definitely a glue pocket. Well, as you can see, there's a lot to consider when you're cutting your wood materials. What I would say is, if you run into a situation where your settings are not working like they normally would, keep your power the same and start reducing your speed until you start to cut that out. Don't play with both variables. I find that a lot of people get confused because they change their power, they change their speed, and they just don't know where they're at. And start lowering that speed until you start to cut that material out. Really, that's all you can do. Take one variable out of it. Don't mess with your power, mess with your speed. Start to reduce it until that material drops out. And that's basically your new setting for that particular material. Now, the next time you go and get material and put it in your laser, again, you're going to have to do a little test cut just to see where you're at. But I can tell you, in the last 3 or 4 months, I've had to change the settings on my wood products probably 3 or 4 different times. It's just the way it is right now. Be flexible. Don't let it bother you. You just need to know how to adjust it. Just reduce your speed a little bit until it starts to drop out. Away you go. If you know how to recognize a glue pocket, you saw that it's just a kind of a dark flash on the top of your material. And what you want to do is don't do what I did. Don't move that material, you know, tap around, make sure everything else is loose, and then identify where that glue pocket is in the preview window. Back that up to just before that area and rerun your job. Let it cut out that small area, then hit pause and escape. And 9 times out of 10, you can save that piece. Most glue pockets that I've found, once you run it a second time, it cuts it free and you're good to go. So it's not something that you have to trash the whole piece. But learning how to do that is critical. So anyway, I hope this information helps you a little bit. Things are a little bit crazy right now from a material standpoint because it just seems to be very strange. What you see is not necessarily what you get. And as always, if you'd please like and subscribe, I'd really appreciate it. If you enjoy the content on my channel, if you'd share a thanks with me, I'd sure appreciate it. And until next time, thanks and have a great day.